everyone, this is Alisha Costanzo and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a book tag. Specifically the How I Choose My Books tag by Emma from the Bookish Underdog. Sorry if you can hear my heater by the way in the background. It's flippin' cold, so that's gonna be there. Anyways, she's got 8 wonderful questions that I'm gonna probably struggle to answer because that's how I do. I like to do these things like off the cuff kind of. I have a little bit of notes, but mostly I'm gonna do some verbal vomiting here. So yeah, stick with me. Okay, question number 1. Find a book on your shelves or your e-reader with a blue cover. What made you want to pick up this book? So I actually went to my real life shelves, the ones that I could access, and I found this guy. And I was just talking to my husband about remembering getting this book. It says half price books on it, but there was another, I think it was Hastings, had a resell of a resell, essentially. But this is Wolves, Boys, and Other Things That Might Kill Me, a novel by Kristen Chandler. And this came out in 2010. It's a hardback. You can see I probably got it in 2010, right after I moved to Oklahoma. And this was after the whole Twilight fiasco and the upping of paranormal stories, and it really interested me. I can't remember why it interested me because it's been so long, but let's read a little bit about this and see what. And apparently I've read the first chapter. I don't remember the first chapter, but I stopped reading after the first chapter. Not uncommon for me to just not feel like that's the mood for a book, or that book is the right mood for me at the moment, and going to something else and then coming back to it later. I totally do that all the time. But alright, let's see what this says. KJ Carson didn't plan on writing about the wolves living in Yellowstone National Park. She'd been really good at minding her own business for the past 16 years. But when shaggy-haired Virgil shows up in her journalism class, increasing the population of West End, Montana to 948, KJ finds herself doing things she'd never imagined. She's getting up before dawn to go wolf watching, writing newspaper articles about the highly controversial wolf reintroduction program, and kissing the boy who helps her do it all. She may be in over her head, but she's finally following her heart. And then a shotgun blast reminds her where she is. A place where the only good wolf is a dead wolf, and anyone who defends them is threatened with a similar fate. In the past, KJ would have turned tail and run, but now there's more than just her own life at stake. Is she interested in the wolves because she's falling for Virgil, or is she falling for the wolves themselves? Interesting. I like wolves in general, like the real animal wolves. I like them, and I like werewolves. This makes me want to read this again, or once again makes me want to read it, because I haven't read it yet. That makes sense. This might have to go on my TBR for 2021. You know, the 21 you must read before the end of 2021. I might have to do that, because I do need to actually tackle my physical TBR, which I haven't been doing. Alright, so you can see what interested me, I hope. The cover was pretty cool. The blurb was pretty cool, and it was the mindset of wolves and werewolves at the time, and vampires and stuff. So, there we go. Hope that makes some sort of fucking sense, because, yeah. Alright, number 2. Think of a book you didn't expect to enjoy, but did. Why did you read it in the first place? Three Dark Crowns is one of those books for me. I remember hearing about it all over the place, on Goodreads, on YouTube, on Instagram, and thinking that it sounded interesting, and then I found it on my library, put it on hold, and I got it, and so I just kind of listened to it, and surprisingly really enjoyed it. I did not expect to enjoy it. I went, oh, this is epic fantasy, and it was on one of my TBR videos. This is an epic fantasy, and I rolled epic fantasy, and I don't generally like epic fantasies, but I liked this one, and the reason I liked this one was because the world building happened in pieces instead of front-loading everything about everybody in the beginning of the book, as most epic fantasy do. It just, every time we hit a new perspective, a new town, we learned a little bit about the town, we learned a little bit about the people, and then we went on with the story of the main characters. And I really, really appreciated that. I am interested in reading the entire series because of that ending. Holy shit. I hate so many people in this book, but I'm rooting for so many people that I should hate. And it's just, yes. Just yes. I am very intrigued by this series. Let's see if I can't find a small blurb for this so you guys know what's happening with this book. I know based off of having read it, that there are 3 sister queens. Triplets are born to the old queen, and then she gets to relinquish being queen, and there's some suggestion that they might not actually survive that relinquishment. And these girls are raised until they're 16, and then they go through a ceremony, and they have to kill each other, and only one can survive and be queen after that. In this case, we have, of course, triplets. I'm reading from the thing. So Maribel is the elemental, and she's supposed to be the strongest of them all. There's some spoilers there that I will not reveal, but she's one that I don't particularly like because of a boy issue. Anyways, then there's Catherine, who is the poisoner, and it opens in her perspective and how weak she is and how she's got to eat all these poisons, and then she pukes all over the place and she's like dying and nobody will help her because they're disappointed in the fact that she couldn't keep the poisons down. Another reveal about that later. Do like her character quite a bit. And then, I'm not going to say her name right. Arsoni? Ari? I don't know. She's a naturalist. She's also one of the weak queens. Maribella is the strong queen. And this one's a naturalist, so again, there's spoilers about what she is and what she's connected to. And her best friend's this really, really strong naturalist, and she's really, really weak. And part of the boy problem happens with her best friend, and there's a whole bunch of shit that happens that really intrigues me as a reader, and I want to know what happened. I like to be angry, apparently, when I read. Angry for a good reason. Not angry at the writing, but angry at the characters because they were written well. And that's what I found with this one. I ended up really enjoying it, and I didn't expect to. Okay. Question number 3. Stand in front of your bookshelf with your eyes closed and pick a book at random. And she has in parentheses, as I'm lazy, I used a random option on Goodreads instead. How did you discover this book? Okay, so I did that too. I did random, and I got, I'll show you guys, like here. I got 28, and that ended up being The Hating Game, and I have not read it. I'm not sure what interested me about it other than hearing Drinking by My Shelf, her talking about it, and oh my god, why don't I know her name? Pause. Is her name Emma too? Because I'm gonna freak out if it is. Her name is Emma too. Okay. Emma from Drinking by My Shelf talked about it, and I remember being interested in a bit of the romance. I'm trying to get more into romance. I'm not typically like a contemporary romance reader. I like things that are dark and violent generally, which is why Megan March is doing really well for me, because there's a lot of darkness and violence without being too overly dark and violent, like Gemma James is in her Zodiac series, which I would still like to continue but haven't yet. Anyways, that's my random book that I found was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I am interested in reading it. What is it about? I'm pretty sure it's like a fake dating or hate to love. I like hate to love, by the way. That's my favorite kind of romance if I'm going to read a contemporary romance. Nemesis, that's where it starts. An opponent or rival for whom the person cannot best or overcome. Okay. So this is absolutely a hate to love romance, and yeah. That's all I really needed to know about it to put it on my Goodreads shelf. I don't always get to all of my Goodreads books, but, you know, it's there to remind me when I'm looking for something different. There you go. Does that say it's now going to be made into a major motion picture? Interesting. I might watch the movie. I'm terrible. I will watch movies before I read books because I don't find that it ruins books. I find that the books ruin the movies. So, yeah. Okay. Anyways, that's because the books are usually better than the movies. That's what I mean by that, by the way. Alright, number 4. Pick a book that someone personally recommended to you. What did you think about it? Okay, I have 2. Hold on, let me grab the first one. This is the first one. Now, granted, I had this book to begin with, and then my husband read it. And then he highly suggested it to me over and over and over and over and over again. And guys, it was so much better than Twilight. Like, honestly, so much better. She got better after Twilight. Some of the things that I've read of hers got better. I don't know about the new book, Midnight Sun. It's on my hold list, and I will get there eventually. But this, I turned on my printer by accident. This was really good. This was a 5-star read for me. And this is about an invasive species taking over the Earth after it's taken over and trying to find the little pockets of rebels left. And then, of course, one host actually finding them because she connects with the person still in the body that she took over. There is a little bit of triangle romance in it, but it's well enough done that you're kind of rooting for both of them. Because there's two people in her body, and one's in love with one and one's in love with the other, and it's cute. I liked it a lot. It wasn't action-packed, but it had just enough action to get me through all the slow bits of introspection and wondering about what it means to be human. I found that very fascinating, and it was really long. I listened to the audiobook because, let's face it, I am an audiobook addict, and yeah, I really liked it. So thank you, Jason, my husband, for suggesting I read this. The other book that I was personally recommended was on my email list, and it's been over a year since she suggested it to me, and I haven't written anything in my email since. I really should start with this opening, and that was The Cruel Prince, because Holly Black is now one of my favorite authors, because I read The Cruel Prince, and this was just one of those surveys or something I did where I'm like, hey guys, you want to win a free book? Tell me what your favorite book is and why, and a whole bunch of other questions. And then I put them in a poll and I sent out free books. And that one really interested me because I love fae, I love paranormal fantasy, urban fantasy, and those types of things. I loved The Cruel Prince, not as much as I loved The Wicked King, my favorite of those series, but that got me onto Holly Black. Yeah, I love both of those suggestions, personally made for me, and I need to tell her that I love that series and to suggest me more books. Honestly, yes. Thank you. Question number 5. Pick a book that you discovered through YouTube or book blogs. Did it live up to the hype? Now, a book that I recently read because I heard about it on YouTube, I think it was actually Kayla from Books and Lala, and I think I heard somebody else talk about it too, but I can't remember who. Mentioned 172 Hours on the Moon by Johan Harstad, I think is how you say that name. I ended up getting through the whole thing. It was interesting enough. I think I gave it a 3. It did not really live up to the hype, but that might be personal bias because my favorite author, Christopher Pike, wrote a very similar book that is one of my favorite books of all time, and that's Season of Passage. He did it better. So yeah, it was a bit long-winded. I liked a bit of the violent stuff. The internalizations were okay. Some of the descriptions were like, but the tension, because I knew what was going to happen, because I'd read that story before by somebody else, it didn't live up to the hype for me. Number 6. Find a book on your shelves or e-reader with a one-word title. What drew you to this book? Now, I picked this book. It's a rather old book, and a lot of people have talked about it. How old are you, by the way? 2012. I remember getting this in New York when I went home to visit. Cinder. This is, of course, the original cover, and it was this image specifically that I went walking by and I turned and I looked and I'm like, that's a Cinderella cyborg story, isn't it? And I went and I grabbed it and I'm like, it's a fucking Cinderella cyborg story. Of course I have to read that. Are you kidding me? Because this was before like cyborgs and steampunk was starting to rise and become more mainstream, and so I had to get my hands on this book, especially in YA. It wasn't very relevant or prevalent in YA at the time. The image and the pop of the red with this. Guys, can we talk about how beautiful this cover is and how much intrigue it creates? And if you haven't read this series, by the way, she is a master. You should definitely read her shit. She knows what she's doing. She did a good job. Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Alright, number 7. What book did you discover through a film or TV adaptation? And that is actually a collection of short stories. Sherlock Holmes, all of his adventures in Sherlock Holmes-ness. I went through them all because it was part of my I should have read this by now section in my TBR, in which I really should have read this by now because I've watched almost everything Sherlock Holmes. I read adaptations of Sherlock Holmes retellings of that all the time. And I thought to myself, why aren't you familiar with the original? You should be familiar with the original to enjoy the retelling so much. If you don't know, most of the originals disappoint me, unfortunately. But I really enjoyed some of the stories and being able to figure out some of the things before they did. There was a few stories on that, one of them having to do with the KKK, which they had never heard about, which I know the time frame, but it just blew my mind. I'm like, obviously, guys. But I really did enjoy listening to Sherlock Holmes, and I enjoyed reading the first half of A Study in Scarlet, and not so much the second half. I couldn't get through that part very well. I kind of skimmed it. But I really did like a lot of the writing tricks and twists and how true that was to the Sherlock Holmes reimaginings that I have consumed for a long, long time. If you haven't watched Sherlock on BBC, you really should. It's one of my favorites. Yes. Okay, last question, guys. Number 8. Think of your all-time favorite books. When did you read these and why did you pick them up in the first place? Okay, so you guys are gonna know like the answer to this. You really should. Is the Last Vampire series or the newly branded Thirst series by Christopher Pike. This is what got me writing. This is what made me start loving vampires. This is what made me love starting mythology. And the type of writing style that he uses is one that I very much sound like. He was my idol, so I mimicked him until my voice developed in its own way. This is very similar to things that he does. Now, I could edit the shit out of this now as an editor. Because there are some things where I'm like, dude, you use that way too much. But the story and the theme and the feel of his stories are magnificent. And I was 14, 15, 16 when I first picked up the book. I was reading a lot of things from the library. I was done with my Goosebump books, obviously. I was too old for them. I was reading R.L. Stein's Fear Street books and enjoying them. And then I read his adult novel, which I didn't get at the time because I think I was too young to understand a lot of what was going on. But then within that section of my library was Christopher Pike, and he had like 60 books. And I'm like, alright, I like vampires, let's see what this one's about. And I read it, and I was sucked in. There was 2 copies of it at the library. And me and one of my best friends at the time, Amanda, were reading it together. And I remember I'd get sucked in and reading it, and she'd be behind me, and so I'd read it again out loud to her as she followed along. And that sparked 5 stories in my brain at the time, and I was writing a lot of fan fictions before that, and it was the turning point for me was this series, Christopher Pike, and all of his writings and all of his wonderfulness, and how advanced he was for when he originally wrote these books. When was that? Like in the 90s? I would think it'd be the 90s. Are they going to tell me in this book? Because this is a reprint. Yes. First Last Vampire was 1994. It was fairly new when it came out, but a lot of he was one of the first authors that had a Latina female lead on his cover in the 90s. So he was a pretty forward working author and fought to not be whitewashed for his characters, even though most of his characters are white because I do believe he is a white man. But he also wrote a lot of females and wrote them well in other cultures and wrote them well. He is a master in my mind. I know a lot of people my age he influenced, and if you get a chance, you can get past the first one and some of the tropey shit that has been done over and over and over again now because, he was one of the first people to do it. It's really worth reading through the series because it goes into some fantastic places. And the mythology. The mythology. Okay, sorry, I get way too excited. Okay, so those are my 8 questions for the How I Choose My Books tag. If that reveals any type of inner workings in my brain, I have no idea. It's just a reason for me to babble for the last 20 minutes and put a video out. I would love to know some of your answers to these questions. Answer the last one for me. How about that? What is your all-time favorite book? And what made you pick it up originally? Let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!